you. Stop. You know I've already done my top 10 books of 2022, and if you haven't seen it, I'll have a link up here. But I asked if you'd like my top 10 children's books since I read a lot of middle grade and I also read some young adult. And several of you said yes. So this video is for you. Who am I? I am the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. Now wait a minute. Wait a gosh darn minute. Did I include young adult with children's books? It may surprise you to know that young adult is considered a category of children's books. Anything marketed for 17 years and younger is considered a children's book. That is why you may see Captain Underpants next to Twilight in best-selling book lists, or Diary of a Wimpy Kid next to A Good Girl's Guide for Murder. I think because some adults still read YA, people seem to have forgotten what a young adult age group is, and that is an age category that spans from ages 13 to 17. So let me say that again. Young adult books are for kids between ages 13 and 17. Now for me personally, my sweet spot for children's books is in the 12 to 15 age range, which is in that sort of gray area between upper middle grade and lower young adult. So that's why this list will include both YA and middle grade. Okay, we got that out of the way. As with my top 10 list for adult books, if I've read multiple books in a series, I'll just list one book or shout out the entire series. Also, not all of these books were published in 2022. These are books that I personally read in 2022. So let's get on with the show.
Number 10.
Coming in at number 10 is the Lockwood and Company series by Jonathan Stroud, consisting of 5 books. The first book, The Screaming Staircase, was published in 2013, and the last book was published in 2017. The main characters are young teenagers, and there are no romance subplots, at least in the 2 books that I read. The concept is pretty interesting. It is set in modern London, but in this alternate reality, 100 years ago, some event called The Problem allowed ghosts to be released in the city, and only a few sensitive children and teenagers can see and deal with the ghosts. But everyone else, including all the adults, can be killed by these ghosts. So the premise is that society has evolved where squads of children are licensed to fight ghosts. And once a child ages into his late teens or 20s, they can no longer see the ghosts and have to retire as ghost hunters. So the story centers around one of these ghost fighting squads, Lockwood and Company, who are made up of Lockwood, the mysterious young boy who lives alone and leads this group, Lucy, the newest member, who is some sort of savant when it comes to ghosts, and George, who is described as portly and is the group's researchers. The stories are more thriller mysteries that are very well written and very clever. However, they are also really long. These are long books. Now, I picked up this series because I absolutely adore Jonathan Stroud's Bartimaeus series about a boy sorcerer and a demon he summons. And those books were also long, but I could not put them down. For Lockwood and Company, after reading the first 2 books, I found I didn't really have the desire to continue. So take that as you may. Now, I have just heard that Netflix is releasing a series based on these books, which I will be very interested in watching. though I suspect they may throw in a romance between Lucy and Lockwood because Hollywood, but we shall see.
Number 9.
Coming in at number 9 is The Glass Witch by Lindsay Puckett, published in 2022. I was interested in this because it is a debut middle grade book by a YouTuber who has a great AuthorTube channel. Anyway, the story is a contemporary supernatural about this young girl named Adelaide, who is a witch whose magic doesn't seem to be very powerful. She is overweight and struggles with body positivity. Her mother is about to travel somewhere for a job and plans to leave her with her grandmother, but then things go awry on Halloween when a witch hunter awakens and threatens the whole family. I really loved the beginning of this novel. The first-person voice of Adelaide was charming and funny. I didn't find the story terribly deep, and it wasn't meant to be, but for some reason I thought it was going to be a little bit deeper. Anyway, this is a solid debut, which I'd recommend to any young reader, though it's probably not a middle grade that adults will enjoy because the plot was very predictable.
Number 8.
Coming in at number 8 is The Last Gamer Standing by Katie Zhao, published in 2021. This is a near-future science fiction novel where VR games are the main sporting event. And 12-year-old Chinese-American girl named Raina Chang qualifies to go to some sort of summer camp or academy for gamers. However, she is considered a mediocre gamer, but she secretly plays as a top gamer as a boy. And she does that because of how girl gamers are treated. So a lot of this book deals with sexism among gamers and the toxic atmosphere that can be found in boys' clubs. Someone finds out her identity and threatens to dox her, and her father is pressuring her to quit, but she needs to win prize money for the competition because her mother needs an operation, so there is a lot going on, including a little bit of racism. Personally, I kind of prefer a more optimistic near future because here society feels like it has backslid in terms of sexism and racism from where we are now. But I did find the story compelling, and I bet it will appeal to a lot of gamers, especially girl gamers.
Number 7.
Number 7 is a collection of books generally known as Robert Heinlein's Juveniles, published in the 1940s and 50s. Robert Heinlein wrote about a dozen of these hard sci-fi novels specifically for children. These were written before middle grade and YA became categories, but they read middle grade to me, even though the characters are usually around 16 or 17. There's usually no romance, but if there is a love interest, like in Starman Jones, at the end the boy and the girl naturally drift apart, which is what usually happens in real life, but you never see in teen novels now. Anyway, some of the stories, like Farmer in the Sky, were published as a serial for the Boy Scouts magazines. And while almost all of these books have male leads, there is one book, maybe my favorite of the Heinlein Juveniles, with a female character, Pod Kane of Mars. Heinlein never grouped this with his juveniles, even though Pod Kane is 15 years old and it reads like the others, but most people, including myself, include it with the juveniles, and I think it's one of the best. Personally, I think Heinlein separated Pod Kane from his other juveniles because Pod Kane was published in the 60s while the others were published in the 40s and 50s. Anyway, all of these stories are extremely dated insofar as the relationship between men and women. Women are almost always wives and mothers. Heinlein was progressive insofar that he includes a non-white character in several prominent positions like Mr. Kiku, a top government official in The Star Beast. I read most of these when I was around 13 years old and was feeling really nostalgic for middle grade hard science fiction, which you really don't see much of these days. And I'm always impressed by Heinlein's craftsmanship as a storyteller. He doesn't have the most beautiful prose, but he knows how to tell a story that makes you really feel for the characters and paces his novels in a way that really makes it hard to put down. I'll probably dedicate an entire video to Heinlein's juveniles, but my top picks are Citizen of the Galaxy, Podkayne of Mars, and Red Planet.
Number 6.
Number 6 is Hotel Magnifique by Emily Taylor. This is a young adult book published in 2022. There is a vague romantic subplot, which I sometimes dislike in YA books, but in this case it didn't detract from the story of two sisters, Janny and Zosa, in a setting inspired by the Belle Epoque period, and that's basically what France's Victorian era is called. Magic in this world is generally considered evil, with the exception of the magic of Hotel Magnifique, which is a hotel that magically teleports to a different city every day. Janny and Zosa get jobs there, but Zosa, who is hired as a singer, is immediately whisked away and isolated from Janny. So Janny tries to figure out what has happened to Zosa and attempts to free them both from the magical contract they signed to work for the hotel. She befriends the dark, brooding, handsome doorman Belle and discovers the dark secrets of the hotel. Hotel Magnifique is Emily Taylor's debut novel, and I think it is worth checking out.
Number 5.
Coming in at number 5 is Sal and Gabby Break the Universe by Carlos Hernandez, published in 2019. In my search for a middle grade sci-fi, I came across this novel about Sal Vidon, a Cuban-American boy who is just starting at this school of the arts. While most of the kids are actors and dancers and singers and that type of thing, Sal is a stage magician. So right off the bat, we know something is up with Sal when he manifests a dead chicken in the locker of a boy who is bullying him. And we also meet Gabby, a girl who is super ambitious, is the school president, and she becomes suspicious of Sal and this chicken episode. Of course, we find out that Sal can open portals to alternate realities, sometimes unconsciously, and sometimes for some very dark effects. I really love this novel and plan to read the sequel, Sal and Gabby Fix the Universe. It is mostly light and humorous, but it does deal with some heavy subjects like death and abusive parents, but ultimately it is about the bonds of friendship.
Number 4.
Number 4 is a book I've talked about before, Kiki's Delivery Service by Aiko Kadano, published in 1985. Most of you probably know it from the Miyazaki anime adaptation. It is a very simple, quiet story about a young girl, Kiki, who comes from a long line of witches, but each generation of witches aren't as powerful as the ones before, and the only power that Kiki has is the ability to fly on her broom. She has to leave home at age 12, as all witches do, to find a city to settle in and be their patron witch. So she takes her little black cat familiar named Gigi and sets up shop in a big city where most people haven't even heard of witches. But since her only talent is flying on her broom, naturally she starts up a delivery service. Like I said, this is a small, sweet story about a girl coming of age and finding her place in society.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This was marketed as young adult, but reads to me like a middle grade. But again, remember, YA can target kids as young as 13. And this one feels very young. In fact, I'm surprised it wasn't marketed as middle grade. Anyway, I felt this novel gave more horror vibes than fantasy, and it's about a young orphan named Olivia who finds out she has inherited a place in this mansion of her long-lost relatives. Living in this mansion also is her cousin Matthew, who doesn't seem to like her and doesn't want her anywhere near the mansion. And there are, of course, dark secrets in the mansion, and there is a dark history that has been haunting Olivia's family for generations. This is a creepy, spooky kids book that puts R.L. Stine goosebumps to shame. Oh, and it also won the Goodreads Reader Choice Awards. If you're a fan of Coraline, you may want to check this one out.
Number 2.
Number 2 is the Amari series by B.B. Alston. The first book, Amari and the Night Brothers, was published in 2021, and the second book, Amari and the Great Game, was published in 2022. This is exactly the type of middle grade stories that are right up my alley. Fast-paced fantasy with humor and high stakes. Yes, it is on the surface set in a magic school, which I'm a little bit over, but it doesn't feel to me like a clone of the books that shall not be named. Amari is a young black girl whose brother has disappeared. Even though he's presumed dead, she and her mother refuse to accept that. Amari gets a message from her brother saying that if she's reading it, he's probably dead, but he wants her to go to this special summer program. The summer program, of course, is training grounds for supernatural investigators, and it is found out that Amari has magic powers which are considered evil by the school, and this sort of parallels how Amari was treated as the poor black girl in a gifted school. And I love these books, but warning, the second book ends on a very big cliffhanger, which just reinforces my dislike of picking up a series before it's complete. But if you are a Percy Jackson fan, this is exactly the type of book that should appeal to you.
Number 1.
My number 1 pick will probably come as no surprise to those who follow me because it is the Enola Holmes series by Nancy Springer. There are 9 books in total. The first book, The Case of the Missing Marquess, was published in 2007, and the most recent book, Enola Holmes and the Elegant Escapade, was published in 2022. These are standalone mysteries. Think Nancy Drew, though you should probably read them in the order they were published. Enola Holmes is the younger sister of Sherlock Holmes, who refuses to be boxed in as a proper young lady, so she runs away before she can be sent to some horrible finishing school, and she starts her own detective agency. She creates an alter ego persona of a gentleman detective who, of course, no one ever sees because he doesn't exist, but she poses as his secretary. These are cozy mysteries that are pure fun. It's one of those cases where I started reading one and then found myself picking up the next book and the next book and the next book until I have read them all. Now, you may have seen or heard about the Netflix series starring Millie Bobby Brown, but just to prepare you, the book version of Enola is more like her brother Sherlock than the swashbuckler you see in Netflix. In the books, Enola is plain looking, a master of disguise, and uses powers of deduction rather than any sort of physicality that you may see in the Netflix series. But if you want a cozy Victorian mystery with a young, brassy girl detective, check out Enola Holmes. So those are my top 10 kids books for 2022. Do you read children's books? And yes, I'm including young adult in with that. If so, what was your favorite for 2022? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.